Good morning, everyone. This is Michelle Hughes from Ageless and Timeless, and I wanted to let everyone know that we're having a terrible rainstorm here. So if you hear a lot of noise, it's been raining for 2 days solid. They call it a new word in our vocabulary called an atmospheric river. So I apologize, but we're trying to keep the sound out of the tape here today. So this morning, I have a guest who I've been talking to since August, and we took a long time to get together on a podcast, but I've been reading about him for 3 months, and his name is Chris Burres, and he's from Houston, and he's the co-founder of a company called MyVitalC, which we're going to hear all about this morning, but I want Chris to be welcomed in the normal way we always welcome our guests on Ageless and Timeless, which is to say, everyone is the most exceptional guest, and we're always so lucky to be able to pick their brain and have a chance to know more about who they are and what they do and what they want to do. That's really one of the important chapters. So good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Michelle. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm glad you're surviving the atmospheric river. I'm not hearing anything on my end, so either it's not that loud or your crew is doing an amazing job keeping that sound out.
That's great. Well, Chris, you're all over the internet and there's so much information, but I want to start as if nobody knows anything, including me, which is not true. But I did want to tell everyone that I've been using your products now for since August, since you so graciously sent me a Christmas gift in the summer. And so I'm going to talk about a little bit about my experience today, but I want you to first tell us who you are, as I mentioned in the intro, who you are, how you got to where you are today, and then we'll dive deep into what you're doing today and where you want to go in the future. So why don't you start with the history and tell us a bit about who you are?
Okay, well, first, my name is Chris Burres. I am the geeky guy you see in front of you. I have a lab coat. I work in a lab. I don't want anybody to be confused. I am not a doctor. I work in a lab. I am a scientist focused on a longevity molecule responsible for the longest longevity experimental result in history, a full 90% extension of life. My goal is to help people live longer, happier, healthier, pain-free lives with science. How I kind of got thrown into this role, because this was not really, if you had asked me, I don't know, even 8 years ago, is this a path? Is this how you see yourself? Having written a book, Live Longer and Better, having done a longevity summit, interviewing 55 experts in longevity, including some of the well-known ones in the biohacker space, Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield, Dr. Stephen Gundry. I certainly would have said no, but my path was heading this direction already, and what I mean by that is, I've been working with a molecule, and I started working with it in 1991. The molecule we call ESS60, and I probably should start by talking about ESS60, its discovery and everything about it. So I'm holding up a model of a molecule. If you're listening, I know this is a podcast. Don't worry, you don't have to find a picture. Just imagine a soccer ball where the lines on the soccer ball represent the bonds between the carbon atoms. So you have a spherical molecule of 60 carbon atoms. Again, the molecule was discovered in 1985 here in Houston at Rice University. And the three scientists who discovered it actually won the Nobel Prize for that discovery in 1996. So that's a short 11 years from being discovered to actually being awarded the Nobel Prize. They got the Nobel Prize because the molecule is amazing. I mean, first and foremost, it's the first closed cage molecule. So there's no dangling atoms on the end of this particular molecule. They're all bonded with another atom that's inside of the molecule. So that's a very unique structure. It also happens to perform as well or better than the current best material in almost every application. So it makes better inks, better batteries, better tires, better photocells. And this is often when I'm talking about this, where people are like, wait, we're in an ageless and timeless podcast. We're talking probably about things that we can consume. And you just said inks, batteries, tires, and photocells. I don't remember the last time I woke up and thought, the battery in my car, what is it out of that I need to consume on a daily basis? This is kind of a unique path for a molecule into the health space. And actually, the story gets a little worse first. They actually thought, because of the shapes on the exterior of this soccer ball shaped molecule, again, we call it ESS60, because of the shapes on the exterior of the ESS60 molecule, they thought it would be toxic, and they ended up putting it in a toxicity study. In that toxicity study, they gave the animal model was Wistar rats, and they gave Wistar rats water as a control group, olive oil, and then olive oil with as much of this ESS60 molecule as could be dissolved in it. And instead of being toxic, the test subjects, given the ESS60 molecule in olive oil, really the MyVitalC formula, lived 90% longer than the control group. So that's the it's the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history. And you can kind of imagine how that shifted my career from being a happy-go-lucky carbon nanomaterial scientist, making carbon nanomaterials and selling them to research institutions around the world, which we still do today, to really getting into the health space and kind of the start of my health journey. Although I hesitated for quite some time before I really jumped in feet first.
So, Chris, two questions. What does ESS stand for before the 60?
Yeah, so it's elemental safe spheres, right?
Yep.
So one, the element is carbon.
Yep.
It's safe for human consumption. We actually process ours that way. And it's spheres, right? It's the spherical molecule. And then there's 60 atoms in the molecule.
Okay, second question. Sorry. Where are those scientists today, and what have they made any further advances on the original Nobel Prize award that they got for C60?
Well, that's a great question, and they've actually all passed, right? So they won that Nobel Prize in 1996. They were, we'll say call them seasoned researchers at the time. And remember, this molecule didn't become or enter into the health space. Maybe I didn't mention the date. The publication was 2012 when they published the results of that study where the Wistar rats lived 90% longer than the control group. And it's kind of interesting. You know how.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you know how internet trolls are, and we're like, "Hey, if this is such an amazing molecule, well, why did they die?" And the answer is because they weren't taking it, because nobody was taking it at that time.
Because they thought it was not safe for humans. But now that in 2012, then you determined that it was safe, and that's when your life changed. Because
yeah, let me add to that, because so yes, that's the year of the publication, mid 2012. That did change the trajectory of my career. But we were conservative carbon nanomaterial scientists. In fact, it was probably mid 2013, we started getting phone calls of people saying, "Hey, how much of this molecule should I be taking?" And you have to think conservative carbon nanomaterial scientists with our science hat on, going, "Wait a minute, you're asking us how much of this stuff that we sell to research institutions around the world so that they can do research on inks, batteries, tires, and photocells, how much should you consume?" Probably zero. And we actually added not for human consumption to our labeling in mid 2013. So think from 1991 when we started manufacturing. By the way, that was before the Nobel Prize was awarded. And it kind of came to the realization at one point where, the fact that we were delivering commercial quantities of these materials is part of the reasons the scientists had such concrete about the molecule, and probably part of the reason that they ultimately were awarded the Nobel Prize. Right? But you go back to 1991, we're manufacturing this, and we don't have not for human consumption on our labeling, right? All the way until mid 2013, we added it to the labeling. And again, the literature was clear that it was safe. We just were conservative scientists doing the conservative scientific thing that conservative scientists do. And so we added that to the labeling in mid 2013. And then we went through this kind of interesting journey. My business partner and I, we would get 2 to 3 phone calls a week, and it'd be people saying, "Hey, my knee pain is gone." And we would say, "Hey, you mean the knee pain of your rat?" Because it literally says not for human consumption on the labeling. And they would say, "Yeah, if my rat weighs 275 pounds, how much should my rat be taking?" And we're like, okay. So that went on really from mid 2013 through to 2017. my business partner and I would get together really every quarter. We're like, what do we want to do with this? Do we want to enter the supplement market? You know, you're in this space. You know how challenged the supplement market is. It's very, very different than delivering commercial quantities of carbon nanomaterials, where those researchers will actually take it and put it into their machines and make sure we sent them what we sold them. That's not how the supplement market works. To kind of exacerbate our disinterest in getting into the supplement market, and kind of between the time of 2013, 2017, I found a peer-reviewed published research paper that said 50% of the supplements they purchased on the market didn't have in them what they said they had in them,
Yeah.
right? This is, again, the opposite of the industry we're in. So every quarter, my business partner and I would get together and like, hey, we're still getting 2 to 3 calls a week and the testimonials are amazing. Do we want to do something really with this? And the answer was no. And then finally in 2017, a guy with a big YouTube following started talking about all the benefits he was getting, taking on a daily basis. And our phone went from 2 to 3 times a week, ringing 2 to 3 times a week, to 10 times a day. So now my business partner and I were like, okay, we are, conservative carbon nanomaterial scientists. We've already looked at the literature. We would have stopped selling it if we knew people were taking it and it was not good for them. But let's ask ourselves 2 questions before we get into this industry. And the first question is a moral question. Are we comfortable selling it? I take it. My wife takes it. I was comfortable giving you samples. Everyone on our team takes it. By the way, it's not a requirement for you to take the product to be on our team. They just see the data and they see it and feel the value. So yeah, we're comfortable selling it. And then the next is the legal side. You've got the FDA, you've got the FTC, you got to cross the T's, you got to dot the I's. We of course do that. This might be a great time because we might talk about some sort of testimonials at some point. Let me throw out the FDA disclaimer that our product has not been evaluated by the FDA and it is not intended to treat, diagnose, cure, or prevent any disease. So now that we had kind of checked those 2 boxes, morally comfortable selling it and legally comfortable selling it, that's when we started bringing this to market, really at the beginning of 2018.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Qigenics. From stem cell therapy to lifestyle coaching, Qigenics is the perfect place to go for all your health and wellness needs. This health clinic is amazing at getting you personalized medicine and wellness that is unique to you. Use the code AGELESS and you'll get 20% off your first service with them. Go to www.qigenix.com to find out more information about these powerful methods. So then so these scientists that got the Nobel Prize, they never saw the human consumption aspect of this. Okay, so they never realized that this was safe. And so what is the FDA's, I know their determination is pretty narrow, but you are allowed to talk about inflammation only as it relates to exercise, correct?
Correct, yes.
So how does that work when people call you and they've been using it for their cancer treatment or their arthritis or whatever? How do you deal with those legal issues? I'm curious because obviously the supplement market is kind of the wild, wild west, as we know. On the other hand, we don't want it to be too regulated because there's so much regulation in the world as it is. So, and we don't want the supplements to become part of pharmaceuticals, right? So that we have to have a prescription. So it's kind of a catch-22. But how do you navigate that terrain with inflammation with respect to the ESSC60?
Yeah, the ESS60 does sit in this unique category, and I'm going to add right now because a lot of people might be thinking, okay, is this a new molecule? Is this a manufactured molecule? In order to get quantities sufficient for a supplement, it is manufactured, but it is also a naturally occurring molecule. So any of your listeners, if they haven't ever taken my product, they've been exposed to this molecule, and the way to kind of describe that is if you take the soot from a candle flame, which you usually collect by putting a cold plate of steel over the candle flame, you'll get that black soot. That black soot has parts per million or parts per billion of the ESS60 molecule in it. So it is absolutely a naturally occurring molecule. In fact, they understand the whole reason the molecule was discovered. And actually, I cover this in my book, Live Longer and Better. was that they were looking at a spectrum in space that they thought might be carbon-based. So they came to Houston. It's kind of a longer, interesting story. The person who really should have been responsible for the discovery of the molecule, because he was a grad student and not a professor at Rice University, didn't actually get the Nobel Prize. That's a great story in the book. But basically, they saw the spectrum in space. They thought it was carbon. They threw it in this machine. And actually, the grad student threw it in the machine, and they realized that this molecule existed, right? This molecule that we call ESS60. So it's a naturally occurring molecule. And then with the FDA, you're 100% right. And it's interesting because I feel very challenged very often in this space, which is I get amazing testimonials. Like kind of the first one that I shared is my knee pain is gone. I get these amazing testimonials, and you kind of want to just go out into the world and share them, right, with everybody.
Right.
But there's restrictions on that with the FDA, and you're not just able to do that. And
Right.
part of me wishes I could, but the other part is if I could, I mean, we're already, supplement industry is already, we can agree, is already a troubled, a challenged industry.
Right.
Imagine if they all were just cut loose. I literally had somebody in the supplement space. When I told you that story, the first question we really asked ourselves before we got into this market was a moral question. Are we comfortable selling it? And I had somebody laugh at me.
Mm-hmm.
Said, I've never heard anyone ask themselves a moral question, which is maybe the only question you should ever ask yourself if you're going to sell something on the market. Obviously, you need to dot the I's and cross the T's with the FDA. But if we were allowed to do a lot more kind of liberal things with the information that we have, that doesn't have the peer-reviewed, double-blind research, if we were allowed to do it, then so would everybody else. And that's not a place that we really want to be. So I know I deal with a lot of people. The medical community has lots of challenges. The bureaucracy of the FDA has lots of challenges. But I do think that they sit in the right space in as it relates to kind of supplements and what kind of claims you can make.
So, what would you say if you were not the co-founder and you were looking at this product? What questions would you ask about the product that would be interesting for you now as the co-founder to answer? What are some of the most important questions that a potential consumer customer could ask?
Yeah, I think I can. I mean, the first one is like, what's the mechanism of action, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'll roll back and answer that question by talking about my role as I stepped into this kind of health expert, this longevity expert, was first to understand our own technology. Like, what is going on with this technology? Is a 90% extension of life, like I was so new to this, I couldn't, I mean, I was pretty certain that a 90% extension of life was a really, really big deal, right? But I didn't know. And so you go out and I start doing research, and you come to find out that the next best way to live longer is calorie restriction.
Yeah.
That's a program where if you reduce your calorie consumption by 30%,
Right.
you can extend your life by 30%. I call that the starve yourself 1/3 to death diet.
Right.
No, no one really signs up for that. And that's a 30% extension of life in an arguably starved state. I mean, scientifically starved state. And by the way, that 30% calorie reduction is not 30% lower than the standard American diet. It's 30% lower than what we should actually be consuming.
Correct.
So that was kind of my first thing. Wow, a 90% extension of life by taking an olive oil with as much of this ESS60 molecule in it is a profound result. And not only that, I want to go back to that original study, because my director of research once came to me and said, that initial study could have been 5 separate papers. There's just so much deep, hearty research in that original publication. So first you have the 90% extension of life, and then the next is the relationship with tumors. So a typical Wistar rat, that's the rats they used in this study, will live about 32 months and will have a known amount of tumor mass. So the longer they live, the more tumors they have in their body, tumor mass they have in their body.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the ESS60 rats, really the MyVitalC rats, lived out to 62 months, none of them had any tumors.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's a very profound result.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the question as I'm sharing this research with people is, what's the mechanism of action? Our most consistent testimonial, I'll start here, is that people take the product in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. And the reality is, if the only thing we did was improve sleep, your physical, emotional, and spiritual. No, there's a mental, physical, and emotional. So your mental, physical, and emotional well-being would be improved. So that's just if it got sleep. But it was kind of my job to dig in deeper. You're looking at a 90% extension of life. What might cause that? If you kind of poll the medical community, it tends to think about aging as an oxidation and an inflammation process, right? So here I'm about to do the FDA dance around inflammation, so you'll hear it here shortly. As it relates to our antioxidant, the antioxidant capability of our product, there's an ad hoc study out on the web that says it's 172 times more powerful than vitamin C. There's peer-reviewed published research that shows it to be 125 times more powerful than vitamin C. So definitely checking off the antioxidant box. The next is inflammation. As I mentioned, we're not able to make claims about chronic inflammation, about that inflammation. The FDA has interrelated chronic inflammation with the diseases of inflammation, which are also the diseases of aging, right? So we're talking about arthritis, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, cancers. Like these are so intimately intertwined that you can't make claims about that without, again, the peer-reviewed, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. What we are allowed to say is that we address acute inflammation, right? So inflammation due to exercise. We've all had like a tough workout one day, maybe even just walked a lot longer than we normally do, and woken up that next day and felt that inflammation in our body. We absolutely can talk about addressing that. I do like to kind of wrap up the inflammation side of things with, we fit perfectly in an anti-inflammatory diet, right? This is the diet associated with the blue zone people. These people tend to have reduced incidences of stroke, reduced incidences of heart attack, and not surprisingly in this context, they tend to live longer. And so we fit perfectly in that anti-inflammatory diet.
So 2 more questions. The autophagy, if someone is doing intermittent fasting, is the use of ESS 60 going to be a compatible component and actually get more efficacious and dramatic results if you are using it along with what we call autophagy?
Yeah, well, one, I do intermittent fasting. I love the experience of intermittent fasting. I think like a lot of people, the person who would like to lose 5 pounds forever, right? Like, right. I never.
That's about every woman I know.
Right. And sometimes it's 10, maybe 15, and then other times back down to 5. So I like intermittent fasting, and the thing that I can share, because I just have this, I think, epiphany about intermittent fasting. You ultimately end up reducing your calorie consumption on intermittent fasting. It's just kind of a natural outcropping of it. You also get into that fasted state, which causes autophagy, which is actually a really healthy process. But the mindset about intermittent fasting, I think, is very different about every other diet. So every other diet I've tried, like counting calories or cutting this or adding that, I've always felt hungry, and hungry felt like the enemy, right? Like, I hate this diet because I'm hungry. When you do intermittent fasting, it's called fasting. And if you're willing to go down the path, you have to understand you will be hungry. That's the goal. And so it changes your mindset about, oh, I'm hungry, this is miserable, to, oh, I'm hungry, yes, this is working, right? So the whole mindset is very different. We don't have any research that says that we enhance autophagy. Although we could make that debate, and I certainly have had, a number of hours of conversation with my director of research who was like, maybe this is working that as like an autophagy antagonist, like so causing autophagy. The real thing, and it's a great question. You're like, Chris, is there more? Like, you waved your hands about anti-inflammatory, you waved your hands about antioxidant. Is like, how do we dig deeper? Our current theory, and it's called the BOSS theory, buffering oxidative stress system.
Mm-hmm.
We know from peer-reviewed published research that this ESS60 molecule gets into the mitochondria. That's already exciting. We know from even way back in the 90s when the molecule was discovered that it could hold up to 6 negatively charged particles on the exterior of this cage. And if you're thinking mitochondria and negatively charged particles, you're probably thinking reactive oxygen species, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, if you took a room full of mitochondrial experts, physicians, researchers, whatever, and said, hey, would it be good to have an antioxidant sponge sitting there, a free radical sponge sitting there in the mitochondria while it's going through the process of producing the energy source for your cell, the ATP?
Mm-hmm.
They would all raise their hands. And that's what we think is going. So I'll describe it. And I've got kind of analogy after I do a quick description. So mitochondria, powerhouse of every cell, right? There's between 50 and 5,000 mitochondria in every cell in your body, except for blood cells, which have 0, and nerve and brain cells, which have 2 million. That's how much energy our ability to think and our kind of nervous system takes. 2 million mitochondria in nerve and brain cells. Just like any powerhouse that you would, power source that you would ever kind of imagine, there's a negative byproduct, right? So your car going down the road has exhaust. Your power plant has a smokestack. The negative byproduct for mitochondria, while it's producing the energy that your cells need to do their job, is reactive oxygen species, right? And I kind of describe these as little oxidative agents running around like bumper cars, rusting everything that they bump into, right? Like that's just a reasonable analogy.
Right.
Now, inside the mitochondria, you have 2 antioxidants, classic antioxidants to take care of them. That is glutathione and melatonin. Now, melatonin, really interestingly, is the sleep hormone. Our most consistent testimonial is related to sleep. I think that there's, something happening there. Now, we understand that different parts of our body can get taxed, can get overwhelmed, can get stressed. And when the mitochondria gets stressed, there's less, it produces more reactive oxygen species than the melatonin and glutathione can handle. What happens then? That's when those reactive oxygen species go out and do damage. And we believe, again, that this ESS60 molecule is the buffering oxidative stress system. So I have this analogy. Imagine it's Mardi Gras. It's the end of Mardi Gras and you're on Bourbon Street and you got these drunk reactive oxygen species running around, smashing into the walls, breaking the windows, smashing up cars. And you've got the police, the glutathione and the melatonin, handcuffing themselves to these reactive oxygen species and getting them off of Bourbon Street, right? So this is great. This is how it's supposed to work. But when it gets over, what do
I lost.
And they throw them in a paddy wagon, right? They just throw them in their local paddy wagon. Okay. Yeah, they throw them in a local kind of paddy wagon and until they can actually replenish themselves. So we believe that this molecule is in the mitochondria, that when the glutathione and melatonin get overwhelmed, this can hold on to those reactive oxygen species so they can't run around and smash up cars and smash up the street. And then when that mitochondria is able to replenish the glutathione and melatonin, they can then handcuff themselves to these reactive oxygen species and get them off of Bourbon Street or manage them so that they're not doing damage in your body ultimately. And that's why we say that the ESS60 molecule is the boss.
You know what's so interesting, Chris, is that most people have never heard of ESS60 or C16. I mean, I've asked a lot of my very, very knowledgeable friends. So you actually have an interesting information providing role to go through here, because you're starting with something like, I mean, everybody knows all the vitamins and the antioxidant ones that are, the most beneficial for getting rid of free radicals, which is what you just talked about. But really, I mean, I'm shocked at how few people know about the C60. So you do have an educational challenge here. I did have another question, though. What about the people who are on pharmaceutical drugs, which is, probably about 80% of the American population? So are there any contraindications of taking the C60 oils with any of the pharmaceuticals that people are on. Let's just take, uh, for heart disease, for statins, as an example.
Yeah, great example. I do want to just provide kind of from our perspective a little bit of clarity, and I can share why we do this. We really think of C60 as an industrial molecule, and
Mhm.
there's peer-reviewed published research that proves when you improperly process it, it's harmful.
Oh,
ESS60 is C60 that's been processed for safer
that's,
human consumption.
I'm glad you clarified that. Really important. Okay,
Yeah,
that's why yours is called ESS60, not C60, and that is obviously MyVitalC is ESS60 is the primary ingredient. Got it. Okay,
absolutely. Thank you, Michelle. Because I mean, we still manufacture C60 and sell it to research institutions around the world. We've been doing that since 1991. When
right.
we bring it to market for people to consume, there's extra steps that we go through to make sure that it's safer for human consumption. So that ESS60 molecule, and there's other reasons, but we don't need to get into them here. You're asking about contraindications. We have tens of thousands of customers. A lot of them are kind of biohackers, cutting edge biohackers. We have not had any reports. In fact, it's our responsibility when you think about what the FDA's role is in this molecule. It's our job to report any serious side effects that are ever reported to us to
Hmm.
the FDA.
Right,
If we do not do that, we are breaking a federal law.
right.
So we're happy to do that anytime it comes in, because the reality is if one person has some serious adverse side effect and we tell the FDA is not going to shut you down because of that. They just want to accumulate the appropriate amount of data related to the appropriate situations. I'm very happy to report, like we've really had this product on the market since the beginning of 2018. Really before that, when you think about the lab version and the 275-pound rat, um, we have never had to report anything to the FDA. Right? We'll have people send us stuff. And we're like, hey, send us your medical records. I think these are more like the online trolls, but we still have to take those very seriously. And there's never any medical records this is probably like 5 cases in the last, since 2018. There no medical records materialized. So we have never had to report anything to the FDA. So our stance is you probably should check with your doctor. I got to be honest, and this is on me because I have to do a better job of educating more and more people about this. Your doctor probably has never heard of this.
Right.
And so they can dig into the research. But our current stance is there is no studies, there is no indication that there are counter indications with any medicine that's out there.
Well, then let's just segment this away so that people understand why. What are the ingredients? And I know you use a carrier oil, and those oils are 3 of the best oils that you can possibly ingest, even if you weren't using the ESS60, and that's olive oil, avocado, and MCT, which is really coconut. How did you decide on those 3 as your carrier oils, and which one of the 3 do you consider to be the most potent in terms of somebody who was just going to choose one?
Yeah, well, those are the 3 healthiest oils, right?
Right,
I don't think you can swing a dead cat in the biohacking space and not hear don't consume seed oils, right? So we're not talking about seed oils.
right.
Um, Olive oil it was a must because the original research. In fact, when people say, "Hey, what should I take? Should I take olive oil, avocado oil, or MCT oil?" We always say olive oil for 2 reasons. First, we're a science-based organization, and all the research is in olive oil, right? So that's number 1.
Hmm.
2, you get more of the ESS60 molecule in olive oil than you do get the others. So I'll give you some ratios. So you get about 0.8 milligrams per milliliter in olive oil, about 0.6 in avocado oil, and then about 0.3 in MCT oil.
Mm.
MCT is a great oil for hunger suppression. In fact, we were talking about a little bit about intermittent fasting. If you really want to hold that tighter, technically, if you have any calories, you're breaking your fast. But we can have good debates. Your goal is to kind of start kick in autophagy. You can get away with some MCT is more comfortable. I mean, your body doesn't actually have to convert that into something that would stop autophagy. It can use it as is, those medium chain triglycerides. And so my typical routine is I take MCT in my coffee, kind of like a bulletproof coffee thing, but I got rid of the ghee because I don't want all those calories.
Right.
And so that's a really good oil. And I can tell you, we've got a two-time U.S. ultra running champion. His name is Anthony Kunkel. He won a U.S. championship at 50 miles and a U.S. championship at 100K, which is 62 miles. So he's a guy who's pushing his body to the absolute limits. It's an extreme athlete, and he loves our product. And the first conversation that I had with him was pretty amazing. Sorry, I'm getting down a rabbit hole, but I think this is kind of exciting. The first conversation I had with him, he was like, listen, I tried one serving, which is a teaspoon of your product, and I didn't really notice anything. And then I tripled the servings, because think about, what a ultra athlete he is and what he's doing to his body. And he said, I was like, wow, this could be the difference between somebody having a running career or a running hobby. And his protocol, he's an extremely analytical biohacker. So he's always cycling on and off things, keeping a good diary, understanding like what's having an impact, what isn't having an impact. And when he's doing a training block, he starts on the MCT. MCT has this ability to suppress hunger. Like as a runner at that distance, you need to be very lean as possible. So he'll start on the MCT, and then he ramps up as he's getting closer to competition day to our olive oil product. And he's literally just like taking swigs out of the bottle. He doesn't measure, a tablespoon, which is 3 of a standard serving. So I think I went down a rabbit hole, and I knew I was going, and then
that's very useful, and particularly because I don't know if you are aware, but we are one of our platforms, the biggest one, is Muscle and Fitness. We are Muscle and Fitness for all the 100 years or so that they were the leading fitness magazine, never had a digital platform. And 2 years ago, I got an email from Dr. Bob Goldman from A4M, American Academy of Anti-Aging. He's the co-founder, and he's joint ventured with them. And I think he might even have a podcast on there, but they were only picking 20 to just basically launch their digital platform. And because they already have a brand, this was going to be like a line extension of the already existing brand, which I think has, somewhere close to 1 billion followers.
Wow.
Okay, so we were lucky. Dr. Goldman sent us a note and said, would you like to be one of the 20? And I said, you don't have to ask twice. But that means that a lot of the people that will view our podcast, which that one is video as well as audio. So a lot of the people that will see this today are people that will be very interested from the athletic and fitness standpoint. So just wanted to segue for a moment to tell you that, so you don't feel that your rabbit hole was not productive, because it definitely is. So
I can add a little more too.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So what he says about the product is that he doesn't believe that it helps his recovery, right? He believes it prevents damage in the first place. And I've got, multiple times that I've interviewed him, multiple notes that he sent me after. I mean, his most recent one is, I'm running 30 miles a day and waking up like nothing happened, right? I'm going to bed wrecked. Yeah. And I'm waking up like nothing happened. He said, if it were speeding exercise recovery, then an 11-day recovery would happen in 5 days, whatever that speedy recovery would look like. But he says, the reason he knows it is because on the last 5 miles of a 50-mile run, by the way, that's a phrase we don't hear very often, where strength and stability used to be a problem, now they're not a problem. And so it's a very unique mechanism of action. If you think about an overtaxed mitochondria, well, you're not going to overtax it more than 50 miles at an elite athlete's pace. Like you're just not going to do more mitochondrial. You're not going to need more mitochondrial effort than doing 50 miles at an elite athlete's pace. And so if we're sitting in there and we're saying, hey, the glutathione and melatonin are overtaxed, And normally the reactive oxygen species would be running around and doing a bunch of damage, but they're all stuck on this ESS60 molecule. Then you have this understanding of why it's preventing damage in the first place.
Okay, so melatonin, obviously circadian rhythms are what melatonin is known for. Particularly, I use it when I jet lag, when I'm traveling, to get my circadian rhythms on the time zone that I'm now living in after the long airplane ride. So, does that mean if I'm putting one and one together and it's going to be three? Does that mean that the ESS60 is affecting your circadian rhythms even when you're not traveling and you're using it just as, like you just described, as an athlete? So, and if that answer is yes, it is, then what is it actually doing to the circadian rhythms that you wouldn't fall asleep during the day, but you'd only fall asleep and have a deeper sleep, the REM sleep at night?
Yeah, I think it's certainly not interfering. So my wife and I love to travel internationally, and when we travel, we land and we're running and we don't actually use melatonin, right? We're running nonstop. And you think about the testimonial, people take MyVitalC, again, report mental focus and energy during the day and then better sleep that night. I think there probably is an honestly, like this is just popping into my head now. There probably is an interaction of the stimuli that signifies daytime with the ESS60 molecule to make sure you're in line even in a stress situation, right? We have to believe that changing time zones is going to be an additional stressor on our mitochondria because we're supposed to be asleep and we're not yet. We're supposed to be repairing and we're not yet. But if we're actually speeding up that syncing of it or making sure that the mitochondria is not experiencing that stress, then that can explain why my wife and I typically don't have jet lag. I can share, my business coach says this. He says, for 50 years, I needed an alarm clock to wake up. As soon as I started taking MyVitalC, I wake up before the alarm clock. And then he doesn't have a consistent supply. It's usually when we bump into each other and I have a bottle. When he's about 10 days off, he needs the alarm clock again. And then he gets back on it and he's waking up before the alarm clock. Now, I mentioned he's a business coach. He's got to do networking, right? He's having a couple glasses of wine. None of that matters. He wakes up before the alarm clock when he's taking the product regularly. And so I think you're probably right. There's some interaction that has a positive impact.
So that's the circadian rhythm. Then you mentioned the glutathione, which of course is the master antioxidant, and that is affecting your microbiome. So what is the connection between ESS60 and the microbiome, which is the hot topic of today?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And frankly, I've not yet spent time kind of diving into that topic. One thing that we can share is that olive oil is amazing for your microbiome, right? I love what Dr. Gundry says. He says the purpose of food is to get more olive oil into your mouth.
Right.
In that original study, if you remember, we had rats that were given water, olive oil, and then olive oil with the ESS60 molecule. The ones given olive oil lived 30% longer, right? So whatever olive oil you're consuming, that is good for you. The only thing that I would kind of end up leaning on is, again, if you're positively impacting your mitochondria, the mitochondria in your body, then you're going to have a positive impact on. I mean, we literally have testimonials from head to toe. And again, I'm going to share a couple testimonials here. I like to just preface it. Hey, this probably won't happen for you, right? Go do the research, look at the peer-reviewed published paper, kind of do your internet search. And if you want to try the product, great. Just assume that this is not going to happen for you. Literally have people sharing, my hair is growing back. It's growing back in places it hasn't grown. This is from the oral consumption. And it's growing back in its original color, right? So that's the head piece. The toe one is kind of interesting. We have an influencer who's a former Navy SEAL, and when he was 5 years old, a crab bit his big toe and split his toenail. Or pinched. It didn't bite, right? It pinched his big toenail. That toenail remained cracked all the way through being a SEAL, a Navy SEAL. When he was 65, after having been on our product for about 2 years, his toe healed. right? So we literally have testimonials from head to toe. And that's really kind of why I dove into understanding this boss theory, because what explains head to toe improvements? Like,
Mhm.
like nothing really explains head to toe improvements unless you're working at least at the cellular level. And I like to point out a lot of supplements are extremely proud to point out we work at the cellular level. Well, we actually believe we work at the subcellular level, right? So helping those mitochondria do less damage when they're stressed and providing the energy that your cells need to do their job.
That's very cool. So then the other issue though is so many people are toxic based on our environment and not just from the food that we eat, but the air that we breathe and the EMFs and the pesticides that are sprayed on that food and so forth and so on. So how does the ESS 60 break through the toxicity issue so that there's absorption and value that your testimonials would certainly suggest?
Yeah, I think we can postulate one answer and talk about, potentially two answers. So one is, remember, most consistent testimonial, focus and energy, take it in the morning, mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. Sleep is when you actually manage a lot of the toxins in your body. The toxic buildup are managed while you're sleeping. So if you're getting any sort of, and we don't know exactly, deeper sleep or more consistent sleep or whatever it is about that sleep
Hmm.
that's better, then that could help you manage those toxins, right? Like that's pretty straightforward. The next is those components in your body that are responsible for managing toxins are cells, whether it's your liver cell, kidney cell, whatever those are, your glands, those have mitochondria in them. And if you reduce the negative load on those mitochondria, they're going to perform better. And then the final thing we can say is we've actually done some research with the University of Houston since they're here. And it turns out, like, we're all familiar with, activated charcoal as certainly as a filter, a great filter of water, getting a lot of contamination out of water,
Right.
chemical contamination. A lot of people will talk about consuming activated charcoal and it having a positive impact on toxins. When we shipped some of our product over to, and this isn't the oil product, this is just the raw molecule,
Right.
over to the civil engineering department, they said that the material performed as well or better, because that's just how this tends to work, as activated charcoal. Now, what's interesting, what's a little bit different is activated charcoal is not a nanoparticle, is not something that's supposed to get through your gut barrier, right? You have this single cellular barrier around your stomach that is supposed to prevent things from getting into your bloodstream that aren't supposed to be there and
Right.
create that barrier.
Right. Leaky gut.
Activated charcoal, a lot of these things that you would take for toxicities are not small enough to get into the bloodstream. So that shouldn't be happening. Any kind of most of the detoxifiers that are on the market are just doing it in your stomach, just making sure you're not making the problem worse. In the case of the ESS 60 molecule, we know that it gets all the way down into the mitochondria. So we know that that's getting across that gut barrier, and we know that it has this potential to absorb things that you would want activated charcoal to absorb.
Well, and it must be affecting the vagus nerve too, because you're talking about people's sleep, which is the brain, which is your total gut-brain axis. So, have you done studies on the impact between the gut and the brain and the transportation through the vagus nerve to get to that area?
No, so our current focus in terms of study, so I think we probably have a positive impact there. Remember, the nerves have 2 million mitochondria in them.
Hmm.
And just to give you some perspective, because this is kind of cool numbers. This is our kind of standard product. It's the olive oil with the ESS 60 in it. And by the way, I'm holding up a bottle if you're listening on the podcast.
Hmm.
I'm now holding up that soccer ball shaped molecule. Each drop of our olive oil product has 400, I wrote the number down, 470 times as many of these ESS 60 molecules as
Hmm.
you have cells in your body.
Mm.
That's how small the molecule is,
Mm.
right? So you're taking a teaspoon, you're not taking one drop. And so that's when you start doing the numbers, you start to understand that this can have a positive impact on each of the mitochondria in your body, right? And so if you're talking about vagus nerve, you're talking about nerve cells. Nerve cells have 2 million mitochondria in them. If you can positively impact those, you're going to have this benefit.
Wow. So, okay. So, the question on the oils. Good old Dr. Gundry, he loves olive oil. He sells his own olive oil. So he has a certain bias, of course. But one of the things that he says in terms of the commercialization of his own olive oil is the purity. And you and I, when we spoke on the phone a few months ago, we chatted about this because I think olive oil is getting a very bad rap that it is primarily cartels or mafia or and Italian olive oil has always been the king of the mountain, but there's so much question now even with Italian olive oil. So you had mentioned that your olive oil comes from Tunisia and that has the 100% purity tested. So how do you go about doing that? I'm only staying with olive oil at the moment because that is the one that gives the most bang for the buck. So I realize the other oils also have their own issues, but not like olive oil. So how do you ensure that you have purity in your oils? What kind of testing do you do, and how do you look the customer in the eye and say, "Don't worry, you're not getting the tainted olive oil"?
Well, there's a couple of things that give us confidence. And what you're really talking about is these kind of, we'll call them mob oils, right? Mob influenced olive oils
Right.
actually have palm oil in them. Now,
Yeah.
if you were to go to some sort of testing facility and try and understand, does mine have palm oil? Is it pure olive oil? What does that look like? They actually have to do genetic testing. They have to genetically test the oil to see if the genetics of palm oil are in that sample. That's not a standard test, right? The only reason like 23andMe and all these genetic tests have come down to a reasonable price is because they can sell so many units of them.
Mm-hmm.
There aren't a lot of people out there doing genetic testing on palm oil, so it's extremely expensive to do that. So our thought process was, if we can deal directly with an orchard, and this is not a thought process that has zero flaws, right? It's not 100%, but it's good, and then we have kind of supporting reasons to believe that it's working well. So we're going directly to an orchard in Tunisia and purchasing directly from them. So we know that there's at least less chance of a middleman. That's the biggest concern. The more middleman, the more likely it is that somebody has thrown palm oil in it so that they can make more money. So
Right.
that's one, and we're pretty confident in that strategy. And then the next thing to really give you confidence is when you have a high quality extra virgin olive oil, it
Yeah.
will leave a peppery flavor at the back of your
Yeah.
throat,
Right.
right? You've
Right.
probably been to a less expensive Italian, we'll say chain,
Yeah.
right? And they'll pour some olive oil on a plate and they'll crack some pepper
Yeah.
into that olive oil. And
Yeah.
the reason they're cracking the pepper is because then that burning flavor at the back of your throat, which is caused
Yeah.
by pepper, makes it taste more expensive.
Yeah.
And when you cut it with palm oil, you cut that burning sensation. And so that is our process of kind of ensuring that we have a high quality extra virgin olive oil.
Yeah. Extra virgin, organic, and first cold pressed.
Yes.
Because that gives you the highest quality of nutrients. And it is the most expensive, of course. But yeah, no, I've learned to shop very uh, carefully, just with a lot of discretion on olive oil, based on all that kind of research, because I realize how important olive oil is. Now I just use your product and just assume that I'm getting. Do you put anything else in as part of the ingredients, or is it just the olive oil and the ESS 60?
Yeah, it's the ESS 60 in olive oil or the, avocado oil or the
Yeah,
MCT oil.
right.
Kind of interesting thing, MCT oil is a clear oil. When you can imagine that the ESS 60 molecule, a carbon molecule, is a black powder, right? So if you were holding it, it would be kind of like sugar crystals or salt crystals in your hand. It's
Yeah,
this black carbon crystals.
yeah,
When you pour it into the MCT, it actually doesn't dissolve really quickly, but it dissolves fairly quickly
yeah.
compared to olive oil, actually. It turns a beautiful purple color,
Oh,
right?
oh,
And it actually does the same thing in olive oil. The thing with olive oil, though, is olive oil has like a green tint to it. And when you
mhm,
add purple and green together, you
mhm.
get a kind of a murky amber, like not an attractive color. But the
Exactly.
MCT oil is just absolutely gorgeous.
So we're oh, I did promise that I would talk about my testimonial. So I wanted just to segue to that for a moment so I don't forget to do it. But before I do, what is in behind you on this on the wall? I see MyVitalC, and then I see a bunch of photos. Are those people that are using your product that are giving their testimonials?
Yeah, they're different influencers.
Okay.
This is actually Jay Campbell right here. He's fairly kind of
Yeah.
biohacking and really focused on peptides. And then I think the remainder of them are just different influencers that we kind of engaged with our products, and
Oh, okay.
all with great testimonials.
Well, Jay Campbell and I have an, I think I mentioned this to you. He's been on my podcast, I think 2 or 3 times. I've been on his 2 or 3 times, and we have a very close relationship. And I'm very proud of uh, presenting him on my podcast because he's helped so many people. Particularly, I call him the king of testosterone. He was the first one to write the book, like the Bible, on testosterone way before it was even recognized for its importance and value, particularly in athletic endeavors. So, well, it's a lot more than athletic, but anyway, yeah. So I adore Jay Campbell, just to let
Me
you know.
too.
Yeah. So okay, they're flagging me, so I got to go quickly now because I didn't realize. I knew how we could talk forever, but I just don't. I don't want to run out of time. So I'm one of those people, Chris, that doesn't. You mentioned earlier, I don't feel supplements when I take them. I don't know if they're doing anything. All I know is probably better that I'm taking them than I'm not. And however, I when I went to A4M and did the brain tap, they told me that first I kept getting these tests because I've been to several A4Ms and I always make a point of going and getting their tests. But the last one, it actually was at Radfest. They told me that I was very tired, and I didn't feel tired. I felt full of energy, and I thought, why is it that the brain tap is saying I'm tired, but yet I don't have the physiological feeling of that? Could that be that I've been taking your product since August? And I just did this in well, it was about a month and a half after I started using your product. So would the brain tap give me a different result than what I'm physiologically feeling in my body
Well,
based on using your product?
well, you would hope that they would be in a line, right? Like that's what you would hope. I don't know exactly what they're measuring. I just know that like most of our customers say mental focus and energy during the day, and
Yeah.
then better sleep that night. Which, by the way, if you didn't get the mental and focus during the first day, focus and energy during the first day, and you got a better night's sleep, and then the next day you would actually have more mental focus and more energy. So I'd
Mhm.
be interested in understanding like what they're actually looking at, what the
Mhm.
parameter is.
Okay, well, if you have a chance, just check out the brain tap. It's their, they have a signature test that they do. And there's another one called the ANS, which is done by Hugh Light. It's another software program, and it basically tests your nervous system, which is part of course, if you're exhausted, that means your nervous system is not functioning. And so in the ANS, I came out much, much higher than on the brain tap, and my nervous system was. They said the overall result was like 80%. And probably the best you could ever get was 90%. You'll never be 100.
Mm.
You'd have to be some super rock star, and there's very few people walking around that have that. But 90%. So they said, my goal would be to go from 80 to 90. It'll be very interesting at A4M next month to test again after being on your product to see if I'm up to closer to the 90. So I'll let you know. But
That would be
okay,
great.
so I want to be sure to let people know that if they use the ageless, and this is the code for everyone's usage, it's ageless, timeless. Don't put the and in for Chris, for Chris's website. What's your website that you want them to go on?
Yeah, so go, and the link is especially for your audience and has a coupon code on the link. It's MyVitalC, C as in carbon, myvitalc.com/ageless timeless. And just like you said, no and in between. It's going to be ageless timeless. And that'll take them to a page. They'll have a coupon code there for $15 off. I will just share all of our products are there. You can find, you can save actually like 25% by going on subscription.
Yeah.
Even if you're just going to order one, go on subscription. Our team, our customer service team has like 900, last time I counted, 950 5-star reviews. They're not trained to talk you out of a subscription. Just take advantage of it. And by the way, most people stay on subscription. You know, more than 50% of our sales are from subscription. So,
Right.
so take advantage of that.
Right. And they could, if they didn't like it for some reason, they can always just cancel with no penalty the subscription, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's always better. I always do the subscription whenever I order products. Okay. Well, sadly, we've come to our time limit, but I did want to ask you one final quick question, if you could answer in 1 minute. And
Yep.
that is, where are you going from here? I did promise that that would be part of the podcast today. Where do you see yourself going the next, let's just say the next year?
Well, so just in line with how many people you're talking to who haven't heard of ESS 60, my goal is to at least double that audience this year.
Mm-hmm.
I want more people to know about it. I'm also have the goal of we're about to publish our second paper with the original lead researcher on that first paper where the rats live 90% longer.
Oh, good.
Unlike supplement companies that are typically out there, we're actually doing research, we're actually publishing, and we're going to continue doing that. I'm very proud of that aspect of our business.
Perfect. Well, Chris, I think, are you going to be at A4M, by the way?
I am. We're going to have a booth, so I look forward to seeing you there.
Okay. What's your booth number for people who are watching?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Well, they just look up MyVitalC when they get on the directory, because I think a lot of our viewers do go to A4M because of what I described earlier with their interest in wellness. And by the way, our demographic and our psychographic primarily are people who are proactive and very interested in taking care of themselves and taking the action steps to do that. So hopefully they'll include MyVitalC as part of their protocol, and I certainly can endorse that for anyone that's looking at giving that website a hit. So thank you so much, Chris, and you have a wonderful weekend and a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you so much, Michelle. This has been a pleasure.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.